بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا تأويل وألهمنا رشدنا يا رب العالمين. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. اللهم إنا نستهديك لأرشد أمرنا وزدنا علما ينفعنا وعملا يرفعنا وأحوالا وأخلاقا ترضى بها عنا يا رب العالمين. اللهم افتح علينا بحكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. صلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Alhamdulillah, so welcome everybody to this fifth installment of the Rasa'il Readings, where Alhamdulillah, in today's session we will be reading through the risala تحرير الأقوال في صوم ست من شوال. And this risala is of course, Rasa'il, as we've seen previously, always manifest in some type of context. Right? There's always going to be some type of reason for the writing of the risala, either for clarificatory purposes or in order to refute somebody or something else, another position which is being forwarded or something like that. And a lot of the legal debate occurred through these types of rasail. That's why they're often considered to be quite important. And the ulama consider them significant enough to kind of refer back to them in their in later discourse. And that's why a risala like this is actually the umda. It's actually the central kind of reliance of Muhammad Amin ibn Abidin in his hashia, in his gloss on the Durr al-Mukhtar, titled the Radd al-Muhtar. When it comes to this issue, he's actually just referring back to this risala. So they become they're quite important. And of course, when it manifests in a gloss like that, he's really only just touching upon the issue. Even though there's usually many more fawa'id and details and so on, which are often perhaps found in the original risala, and that's why we're spending a bit of time with some of these rasa'il, inshallah, hopefully um, uh, gaining a deeper appreciation for the science and for the nature of the masail and for the depth and the expertise of the ulama who actually engaged in this and created this new legal genre, really. It became popular at a certain time. Anyway, that's perhaps a discussion for a different another time. Just a couple of words on Qasim ibn Qutlubugha here. Al-Qasim Zainuddin ibn Qutlubugha he was really from another one of the ulama from East, you could say East Africa. So he's really coming from that region, like there's the Zayla'is coming from Salak, and coming from what perhaps is now Somalia or Ethiopia, that kind of region, and manifesting themselves in the perhaps the Mamluk era, Cairo, and the like, and becoming great scholars. So it seems that Ibn Qutlubugha was also coming from I'm not sure now exactly where, but certainly from amongst that region, and although he is a yatim. He's orphaned in his youth. Despite that, he becomes one of these great ulama of Islam, generally speaking, and not just ulama of the madhab. So Ibn Qutb is perhaps underappreciated, perhaps because we don't have many of his works. They haven't necessarily been printed yet. Otherwise, he is one of the great ulama of the madhab. And that's why in the asanid which we have, he is of course the direct student of Ibn al-Humam himself, right? So he's the direct student of Ibn al-Humam, and the Shaykh of Sari ad-Din Ibn al-Shihna, who is also the student of Ibn al-Humam. So he's kind of like the intermediary, but he's also the student as well. He just starts off like a different line. And this is this important because there are certain excuse me. There are many well, first of all, this is like the Egyptian line. So of course, going down from Ibn al-Hammam, you end up with the other Egyptians, which takes you all the way basically down to the likes of Imam Shulun Bolali in the later period. But also just one second. Excuse me, as I was saying, he's from this Egyptian line of scholarship, and a very significant line being the student of Ibn al-Humam, making very important statements with respect to his sheikh sometimes, but also just generally authoring leaving an incredible tradition of incredible legacy of texts within so many different sciences. Whether it be fiqh like we have right now. I mean, this is nothing. I mean, his Rasa'il, of course, have been printed. It's not necessarily all of them, but it's some of his Rasa'il. And this is actually, I guess, from a different collection. It's not from his published collection. And then he has basically books in all kinds of things, so including the Takhrij, which it seemed that was quite popular in the Mamluk era. Uh, um, yeah, in the Mamluk era, it was actually quite popular to engage in all kinds of takhrij, and that's why he has like the takhrij of the Ikhtiyar, for example, which is published, and also of Bazdawi and others. He has a lot of engagement in hadith, including his sharh on the Nukhbatul Fikr, and also a massive collection on Jarh wa Ta'dil, probably one of the largest collections largest works on it. I think it was published, but I'm not sure if it's actually reached anybody's shelves just yet. And he has, of course, different engagement with the Asanid. He has the Munyatul al-Mu'i, which is the addendum to Zayla'i's Nasb al-Raya on other hadiths, which Zayla'i wasn't able to find. I believe Kawthari was the one who actually did the original critical edition of that. um, a whole host of other takhrijat and also works in aqida, so including his sharh on Ibn al-Humam, his shaykh's Musayra, which was really quite important. He has a hashia on sharh al-Aqaid. He has many books in usul al-fiqh. A popular one, of course, which people now study, is the sharh Mukhtasar al-Manar. Although it's published sometimes as the Khulasatul Afkar, I think there's some debate about whether it's actually the title of the title of the work. Yeah, what's the name of the addendum? It's the Muriyatul al-Mu'i. Uh, yeah, as far as I can recall, I might be mistaken. Somebody can correct me. Um, so what else? And then just in fiqh now. So if we start talking about fiqh, he has a sharh on the Mukhtar. He has a famous commentary, the Tashih wa Tarjih, on the Mukhtasar al-Quduri. That of course is famous, perhaps more so because it was incorporated by Abdul Ghani al-Ghunaymi al-Maydani in his Lubab. He has a sharh of the Nuqaya. He has a sharh on the Muqtasar al-Tahawi. He has a sharh on the Majma' al-Bahrain, if I'm not mistaken as well. He has a sharh on the Durar al-Bihar of Qunawi. He has books on Ilm al-Fara'id. He's really Hanafi Imam Suyuti. Right? He's really encyclopedic. And it's extremely rare to find somebody like this. It's extremely rare. So a lot, even if you talk about Ibn Humam, for example, although he's extremely significant, right? Ibn Humam is extremely significant. He has these real authoritative texts in usul. His tahrir, for example, is Fath al-Qadir in fiqh, and then he has in aqida, he has his musayara. But to find the kind of engagement that Ibn Qutlubugha has is really, you're really hard pressed to find the likes of it. So he just has a tremendous barakah and just an amazing critical mind and ability to engage with all of these tremendous incredible sciences in and of themselves, like just the Mustalah al-Hadith or just usul al-fiqh or just aqida. Even if he just focused on one of these things, you could say that that would have been a tremendous uh, a tremendous endeavor. That would have been tremendous in and of itself. But the fact that he kind of dipped into everything, it's really impressive. Even for example, Aqta, who is the student of Imam Quduri, has his commentary of Quduri, which just came out recently in the last year or two. I mean, Ibn Qutlubugha had like a sharh of the gharib, the unclear kind of, or the difficult, tricky words in Aqta. So basically, you just have to breathe, and Ibn Qutlubugha has something right somewhere, right? It's like there's some musnad that he's in a tartib of, or he's done the rijal of, like there's like a really short one of the really short masanid of Imam Abu Hanifa by Ibn al-Muqri', which again was published not so long ago. Even that he has like a book on the Rijal, or I can't remember now. It's like the Tartib or the Rijal of it. So it's just really just whatever he could find, he was doing some type of khidmah to it, which is really, really impressive. And so this is just one of those examples. So, that's why it's so important to kind of learn about the ulama, because it gives us another sense, a deep appreciation for who they were and how authoritative they actually are with respect to the kind of uh, engagements that they, or the kind of things that they say, right? The kind of sciences or the masail which they express and talk about, and so on. And then he passed away in 879, as you can see here, ninth century Hijri. So inshallah, we'll be reading through his risala. So let's jump straight into it. Inshallah, it starts on page 31 here. Of course, you can read his full, the Muhaqqiq, he has like a full breakdown, introduction to Ibn Qutlubugha. Anybody who wants, of course, you can check. Of course, he has works in his Tahajjud Tarajim as well. The Tabaqat al-Hanafiya is also a very, very popular short work on the Tabaqat of the Hanafis, also quite significant. He would have been mentioned in those after that, but even in recent times, there's although I'm not sure if I have a copy, but there's a work that was published by it's called the Tadhkirat Alam al-Sud, something like that. So it's like a gathering of the black scholars. So I think there's a biography of Ibn Qutlubugha in that as well. So anyway, it's around, but it's important to kind of spend time learning about the ulama as well. So let's dig into now the risala itself. Of course, why is this a contentious issue? I mean, it's a contentious issue, I guess, because of what he says right away at the beginning over here, with respect to the fasting, the 6 days of Shawwal. Yeah. So he says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, فقال المصنف رحمه الله تعالى. Well, this is probably an insertion by somebody else. He says, وبعد لما شاع في القاهرة المحروسة ذكر صوم الست من شوال أنه مكروه، فطلب ذلك العدل الرضا المحصل أبو عبد الله ابن طيبغة الحنفي عمله الله بلطف خفي من كتب السادة الحنفية. So the scholar now, there was talk, I guess, about this is what happens in the Mamluk era. That's why a lot of the things actually happened, right? So a lot of the work actually happened because of the fact that the ulama found themselves, the Hanafis found themselves in this environment where there's all of the ulama are kind of well, we have this, what do you have? It's like we say this, and what about you? And we say that, and like so eventually, like issues will manifest, and and people will talk, and then there's there's a need to kind of clarify certain things. So this scholar, so he's this issue is being raised, and so he wants to look into it from the Hanafi books. So what does he do? He says فوجد مقالة الشيخ الإمام العالم الجلال التباني الحنفي في منظومته. So Tabani, as you can see over here at the bottom, he has what does he say here? Yeah, he has a sharh on the Hidayah. So he has فتاوى في 4 مجلدات ومنظومة في الفقه وشرحها له. Right, so he has a some type of manzuma on the some poem in Hanafi fiqh and a commentary of that. Mm. Of course, he's also a part of this Egyptian asanid of Hanafis. So what does he say? He says فوجد أو فقال في منظومته وفي صيام 6 من شوال كراهة عند أولي الأفضال. So in fasting these 6 days, there's some type of karaha, right? So it might seem a bit intense, but of course you have to kind of disassociate yourself from popular discourse a little bit as we enter into the world of the risala. Otherwise, the whole conversation will be colored by, obviously it's a sunnah, right? Which is what we don't want to say, because to determine something, whether or not something is a sunnah or mustahab or sunnah or anything, it's a hukm shara'i, which requires the fuqaha to kind of explicate. It's not for us to kind of make a judgment and do ijtihad ourselves. So that's why, what does he do? He doesn't go and find a hadith. That he's going to this book by Tabani, which is a famous book. It's there. It's a manzuma. It has a commentary and the like. And then he finds this. And what does it say after that in the sharh? It says وقوله في شرحها أي يكره صوم 6 من شوال متتابعا ومتفرقا عند أبي حنيفة وعن أبي يوسف يكره متتابعا. So what does he say in the commentary? It says that it's makruh to fast the 6 days of Shawwal, whether consecutively or separately, according to Imam Abu Hanifa and according to Imam Abu Yusuf, what's transmitted riwayah from him, is that it's makruh when it's done consecutively. He says, وقال مالك يكره على كل حال. Malik said that it's makruh in every case. وهذا وظيفة الجهال. It's actually what the juhal would do. وكل حديث فيه فهو موضوع. And every hadith on this matter is fabricated. ذكره في كتاب التفسير. So he said this in كتاب التفسير. So he says وصوم شهر رمضان he says نسخ كل صوم كان قبله. والأضحية نسخت كل دم كان قبلها كالعتيرة والأكيرة. وقيل لا يكره وهو قول محمد. والأول أصح لما فيه من التشبه بأهل الكتاب لأنهم يلحقون بالفرض ما ليس منه. Okay, so he mentions now that the fast of Ramadan now abrogated any other fast which was there before it. He says, and the udhiyah, for example, abrogated every other type of sacrifice, such as the atira and the akira, which are other types of sacrifices. Atira was something that was done perhaps in the pre-Islamic times, and the akira was something that was almost like an animal which is slaughtered after you've kind of made built some property or something to that extent. Something to the effect of that. He says, وَقِيلَ لَا يُكْرَهُ, and it's also said that it's been said that it's not makruh. And he says, and this is the qawl of Muhammad. So Muhammad said it's not makruh, but Abu Hanifa and Abu Yusuf are saying otherwise. So he says, وَالْأَوَّلُ أَصَحُ. So it's all in this commentary now. So he says, but the first position, this is actually the sounder position, which is Abu Hanifa's position also. Yeah. He says, because this is tashabbuh bi ahli al-kitab. right? So this is tashabbuh now. And how so? It says لأنه يلحقون بالفرض ما ليس منه. How is it tashabbuh? Because they would add to the fard what was not fard, and then you end up with something which is far greater than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala originally required from you, and that subsequently leads to leaving the act altogether because far too difficult, right? But you only made it difficult upon yourselves. So this is kind of like the logic of how it functions. Either that's illah, how does it function? This is the thinking of it. This is what it means for there to be tashabbuh. This is madhmum, that why would you add to something, add to the fard? This is not praiseworthy. This is there's a makruh, there's a dislike, there's a bad thing to do, and it also resembles the Ahlul Kitab, right? So this is the thinking of it. So what happened? He says, فَسَأَلَ عَنْ ذَلِكَ سَيِّدَنَا سيدنا الإمام العالم بقية السلف زين الدين أبا المعالي قاسما ابن قطلبغة الحنفي رحمه الله تعالى. So after he read all of this, then what did he do? He went to Ibn Qutlubugha, which again teaches us something really, really important. That it's not that, oh, I'm the sheikh now, I can figure things out, right? It's always a sense of recognizing scholarship, recognizing expertise, recognizing authority. It's me alone. That's all well and good if I'm trained. That's wonderful. But the idea is that you can see here how he went. Let me go ask this guy. This guy's like a genius. Let me go ask him. So this is why this is what happens now. So this is the jawab, as he says here, the jawab. Of course, that which is in the brackets is not. It's obviously by the editor. It's not part of the text. He says فأجاب بعد البسملة والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على النبي بما نصه. So after mentioning the basmala and praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sending blessings, peace and blessings upon the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, then he said وبعد فإن الفقير إلى رحمة ربه الغني قاسم الحنفي يقول. So he says the lowly one, in the one who is in need of the mercy of his completely independent, the one who is completely independent of any type of need. He says Qasim al-Hanafi. What does he say? He says قد رفع إلي العدل الفاضل أبو عبد الله محمد ibn طيبغة. I think this is a typo here. الحنفي قول الشيخ الجلال التباني في منظومته وشرحه ما ذكر بحروفه حرفا حرفا. فقلت, so he said, so that question, everything that we just read right now. He says هذا رجل قد عمد إلى تعطيل ما فيه الثواب الجزيل. Right, so he's relied upon that which will lead to the leaving aside of that which or preventing that which from that which we can hope to attain unto a tremendous thawab. بدعوى كاذبة بلا دليل, with through a false claim, rather than a lie. Right, so just a دعوى كاذبة, false claim. It says واعتمد الضعيف والمؤول. Right, so he relied upon that which is weak and that which is interpreted, right? There's an interpretation for it. وترك ما عليه المعول, and leaving that which is actually relied upon. وصحح ما لم يسبق إلى تصحيحه ولا عول أحد عليه, which again is a really, really important teaching point here. And he says that he did tasheeh of something which none of the ulama before him did tasheeh of. You can't just show up and determine what the madhab is, right? So there has to be some sense of precedent which manifests. That precedent is always necessarily going to be an earlier precedent rather than a later precedent. So that's why he says, look, لم يسبق إليه إلى تصحيحه, like ما لم يسبق إلى تصحيحه ولا عول أحد عليه. He says مع النقل المختل, right? So the issues in naql too, والألفاظ الزائدة, the extra words in his naql, in his transmission of it. So even the transmission of what he's saying now, there are issues with it, right? So why you have to be very, very careful in naql as well. He says, وَذَكَرَ مَا لَيْسَ لَهُ فِي هَذَا الْمَحَلِّ فَائِدَةً. He mentioned also things which have no fa'idah, there's no benefit to mention them at this point. He says, وَبَيَانُ ذَلِكَ, and explaining all of that, he says, أَنَّ فِي قَوْلِهِ وَيُكْرَهُ صَوْمُ الست. So with respect to his first words, that is makruh to fast these 6 days إلى قوله بكل حال تكرارا بلا فائدة. So this is just a general point that this is بلا فائدة. You're just repeating yourself here. That's in his original statement. It says وقوله عند أبي حنيفة هذا ما ذكر في المحيط البرهاني والذخيرة البرهانية, which is the اختصار of the محيط. The ذخيرة is the اختصار of the محيط. Both are actually published now. بصيغة تدل على أنه خلاف الأصول. Right, so it was mentioned there, but with wording which indicates that it's against normative transmission. Right, what the key transmission with respect to this masala actually looks like. وعقبه في الذخيرة بأن الصحيح خلافه. So even after mentioning it in the dhira, he actually says the sahih is something else. وفي المحيط كذلك. I guess this addition in some of the manuscripts here, he says also in the muhit it says the same thing, كما سيأتي, as we'll see shortly. وأما قوله وعن أبي يوسف إلى آخره فنقل مختل. So as for his statement, and it's reported from Abu Yusuf, he said that there's an issue. This is a deficient naql from Abu Yusuf. He says فقد اتفقت عبارات الكتب على أن المنقول عن أبي يوسف هو ما في رواية الكرخي. So all of the books, right, they have confirmed what? That what is transmitted from Abu Yusuf is that which is found in the riwayat of Karhi. Which shows you again that there are riwayat in the madhab. Right? There are these different positions in the madhab. The talib now is duty bound, right? This the Hanafi student is to ensure that he is accessing the correct riwayah. That what did the ulama say? That's why it's important for us to kind of sometimes suspend judgment with respect to these types of things until you have clarity from the right tabaqa, from the right set of scholars who are kind of going to make sure that and going to actually say that this is the soundest position when it comes to this. So he says the riwayat of Karhi, this is what's transmitted from Abu Yusuf. What does he say there? He said كانوا يكرهون أن يتبعوا رمضان صياما. That they used to dislike now to follow Ramadan with fasting. خوفا يلحق ذلك بالفريضة. I mean, this is the illah now, right? So what is it? He says out of a fear that it would be like an addendum, right? Something added to the فريضة. ففهم منه صاحب الحقائق أنه كره التتابع فهذا تأويله عنده. So he says صاحب الحقائق now who will come actually in just I think comes up just a moment. Actually shortly. So he is Abu Muhammad Mahmud ibn Muhammad al-Lu'lu'i, and he is the sharif of the منظومة منظومة الخلافية منظومة الخلافيات by Najmuddin Nasafi. Of course, there are 2 published commentaries of it at present. One is by Najmuddin Nasafi himself, and the second is by Hafidhuddin Nasafi, and he's referring to another one, the Haqa'iq. Sorry, yes, so Iran says that when they mention the riwayat of Karhi, what would be the most likely source for that? So you'll find this in the in some of the early works, the mutawalat, and they're actually going to be the madhan for something like this. So, for example, although Imam Quduri doesn't mention it, as far as I can recall, he doesn't mention that Karhi says this, as far as I can remember, but he does mention the point, right? So he does actually talk about this this idea. So, but if you kind of dig around, especially in that kind of early period, you'll certainly find some type of discussion, some type of transmission of it. But it's rare for that to be in the later kind of works. That's why it's more difficult a bit later on, and that's why this is a really important kind of point that he clarifies here, that the mu'awwal alayhi for the riwayah of Abu Yusuf is actually the riwayah of Karhi. But of course, there's still a bit of a discussion on this particular point. Maybe we'll come back to it shortly, because there's an yeah there's something that we'll see shortly about this. So let's leave it like that here. So he's saying that the karahatu tatabu' of there being this consecutive fast which are done after the month of Ramadan, and this being makruh, is the fahm of Sahib al-Haqa'iq. This is not actually the riwayat of Abu Yusuf. This is what he's saying. He says وقال صاحب البدائع الإتباع المكروه أن يصوم يوم العيد وخمسة بعده فهذا معنى قول أبي يوسف عنده. Yeah, so what does Bada'i al-Sana'i', what does Imam Kasani say? He says, what does it mean for there to be itba', which is makruh? That the person fasts now the day of Eid and 5 days after that. So as long as you don't do that, and you skip the day of Eid, you don't fast on the day of Eid, and then you fast 6 days after that, he's saying that this would be fine according to Abu Yusuf. This on, according to what Sahib al-Bada'i is saying here. وقد أخذ هذا من إملاء الحسن ibn Ziyad كما سأذكر. So you can see here, Kasani, where's he get it from? The imla of Hassan ibn Ziyad, right? Because Hassan's going to say this explicitly now, right? So in just a moment, he's going to mention Hassan ibn Ziyad, who is actually indicating this idea, right? Let's see. So he says, وهذا معنى قولي اعتمد الضعيف والمؤول, which is what he said previously, right? So he's kind of explaining himself why he said the kind of things that he said here. أي Ibn Qutlubugha, why did he say that اعتمد الضعيف والمؤول? So this is what it means. The mu'awwal was the previous thing, and the ضعيف was this thing, because he's saying that this is the sahih position according to Abu Yusuf. He says, وأما أنه ترك ما عليه المعول فأسوقه لك من عهد أصحاب أبي حنيفة وإلى زمان مشايخنا قرنا بعد قرن. Right? You want the mu'awwal position? Okay, let me give you the mu'awwal position. How do you determine it? He said, I'm going to go back to Abu Hanifa. I'm going to show you generation after generation what the transmitted position is on this particular thing. This is you cannot object to this. It is only somebody who doesn't understand now fiqh, who doesn't understand madhab, who doesn't understand fatwa, who doesn't understand how these things work, who would object. That's why Ibn Qutlubugha is doing this, right? Just for clarity's sake. Of course, he didn't necessarily need to do this, but he's just to show you uh, how clear this is, right? So how clear this is. So he says, number one, أنه قول Muhammad, as we saw before, right? So even Tabani said that it was قول Muhammad, right? So i.e. that this is okay. Number two, he says, ونقل في الغاية. The Ghaya is also published now. This is of Imam Suruji, who is also Egyptian. This is, I think, Asfar or somebody published this. It's available. Unfortunately, he only got to maybe like a third of the Hidayah, maybe half the Hidayah or something. It's like 20 volumes or something. He only got to like half the Hidayah. So that's the Ghaya of Suruji. He says عن الحسن ibn Ziyad أنه كان لا يرى بصومها بأسا. So he didn't see any problem with it. ويقول كفى بيوم الفطر مفرقا بينهن وبين رمضان. That يوم الفطر alone suffices as a مفرق, between it and the month of Ramadan. That it's only when you can join it to the month of Ramadan that this is when it's considered to be a problem. So if you have that separator of the day of Eid, this suffices. He says, well, Muhammad wal Hasan ibn Ziyad bin Ashabi Abi Hanifa, just in case you weren't aware, right? Muhammad and Al Hasan are from the Ashab of Muhammad, Abu Hanifa. وكانت وفاة محمد سنة yeah, you can say 189 here. Actually just spells it سنة 89 و100. ووفاة الحسن again سنة 400 أي 204. Okay, so number three. Remember why? Because he said qarnan ba'da qarnin. So he's telling you the dates as well. So you can see, look, second century is like this, third century is like this, fourth century now, right? He says وذكر الطحاوي حديث من صام رمضان وأتبعه ستا من شوال من طرق وأقره deemed them to be acceptable وكانت وفاته سنة 21 و300 321 ومولده سنة 29 و200 229. Right, so this is the next طبقة now. He says وقال أبو الليث السمرقندي في كتاب النوازل صوم الست بعد الفطر متتابعا منهم من كرهه. Right, fasting 6 days consecutively after يوم الفطر. Some of them deemed it to be makruh. He says والمختار أنه لا بأس به. And chosen position is that it's fine. There's no harm in it. لأن الكراهة إنما كانت لأنه لا يؤمن من أن يعد ذلك أو يعد ذلك من رمضان. May that this be considered as being from the month of Ramadan. فيكون تشبها بالنصارى. So it resembles then the way of the Christians, as he said before, the way of أهل الكتاب. والآن قد زال هذا المعنى. He said, and now in our times, in the 4th century, he's saying that this manner doesn't exist anymore. Right? Nobody would do this and imagine that it's a part of Ramadan, that it's too late. So implying that it's almost like in the earliest, the earliest generation, that's when this idea might have manifested if the Imams would have held this, and that's why he mentioned initially that Abu Hanifa said it was makruh, and also Malik is saying it's really bad and makruh as well. Right, so you can see in the time of these A'immah, they're very, very cautious. But that's because they are the A'immah who are kind of clarifying the deen, right, at that point. So it's almost like were they to say something that there's a sense that maybe something could be misunderstood. That's how he's kind of presenting it right now. وكانت وفاته shortly after Bahawi 50 years later. He says سنة 73 و300, so 373. وقال الحسام الشهيد في الواقعات. What does he say? He says صوم ست من شوال متتابعة بعد الفطر كرهه بعضهم والمختار أنه لا بأس به. So this is even حسام الشهيد, أي صدر الشهيد, and his yeah, actually this is in his واقعات. Sorry, his واقعات's not published. They published Khasi's تخريج of his what he called the فتاوى الصغرى. So yeah, I don't think it'll be in there. But anyway, he says والمختار أنه لا بأس به ووفاته سنة 36 و500 536. وقال أبو حفص عمر النسفي. Yeah, this is صاحب المنظومة. He says بعد صوم رمضان اتباع 6 من شوال عند مالك يكره وعندنا لا يكره. Right, so according to Malik it's makruh, according to us it's not makruh. فعده مذهبا نصب فيه الخلاف. فعنده مذهب نصب فيه الخلاف. I'm not sure if there's something missing here, but I guess he's just affirming that there's a khilaf which is there, but it's across madhahib, not within the madhab. So you can say some type of khilaf, but it's what they call it, inter-madhab, not intra. Oh, I always get confused. But intra, one of those. وفاته سنة 37 و500. Right, so 537. Yeah. It says وقال صاحب الهداية. Yes, so now صاحب الهداية في التجنيس, أي في التجنيس والمزيد, which is also published. It says صوم الست, although is the whole thing published? I don't think so. I think they published the Idaratul Quran, Karachi. They publish maybe it's a 2-volume edition. I don't think that's a whole thing. So they I'm not sure if there is a full edition of it which is published. I might be mistaken. So صوم الست من شوال بعد الفطر متتابعة منهم من كرهه والمختار أنه لا بأس به. Basically the same thing his Shaykh said. صدر الشهيد. So وفاته سنة 93 و500 593. وقال في الحقائق, this is the حقائق نص that we talked about earlier on, صوم الستة من شوال متصلا بيوم الفطر يكره عند مالك وعندنا لا يكره. It says وإن اختلفت مشايخنا في الأفضل كذا في المختلف. وعن أبي يوسف, so the ulama they differed about with respect to what is the afdal, what's superior, which is a separate discussion now, right? So first we want to affirm that you can actually fast these fasts. Then there's a separate discussion as to what's superior now. Is it superior to do them all together, do them separately, how so? Do them in Shawwal, do them later? Like when exactly do you do them? So that's a separate discussion. It says وعن أبي يوسف أنه كرهه متتابعا والمختار أنه لا بأس به لأن الكراهة إنما كانت لأنه لا يؤمن من أن يعد ذلك من رمضان فيكون تشبها بالنصارى والآن زال هذا المعنى. Same thing, right? That it was there was a fear that it will be attached to the month of Ramadan, but that معنى doesn't exist anymore. He says وقال قاضي خان, same time period as صاحب الهداية. He says وإن صامها متفرقة فهو أبعد من الكراهة. وفاة قاضي خان سنة 92 و500 أي 592. ووفاة صاحب الحقائق سنة 71 و600 أي 671. I guess there's something we can think about with respect to Qadi Khan's statement أبعد عن الكراهة. It's maybe that usage makes it sound like there's some type of karaha, but it's distant from karaha. But of course, the obvious thing to say is that, okay, well, it's not makruh. But he doesn't say it's not makruh. He just says abad, right, is more distant from karaha. So in the sense that perhaps there's a sense of khilaf al-awla type of thing manifesting there. But it's fine. It's still generally in support of what he's saying here. He says, وقال الإمام الزوزني السديدي. Yeah, so he's another commentator on the منظومة الخلافيات. He says صوم الست من شوال عندنا لا يكره واختلف مشايخنا في الأفضل فقال بعضهم الأفضل أن يأتي بصيام ستة أيام متفرقات في الحول وقال بعضهم في شوال. So he said, so some of the mashayikh, they said what's superior now is to do 6 fasts at different, just at different points throughout the year. Right, so 1 in this month and 2 in that month and 2 in the month after that and 1 after that, and you've done the 6 and everything is good. And others said no, just do them in Shawwal, which might be. So of course we can think now about what's the asl for this, right? So why would they say Shawwal versus the Hawl? There are many people saying the Hawl, right? So even in the Sharh of the Majma' al-Bahrain, even there Ibn al-Sa'ati is mentioning the position of that some of the mashayikh deemed it to be acceptable to do it later on in the hawl. So there seems to be an idea that it's just 6 fasts, like it starts from that, like min Shawwal, that it starts from Shawwal and then you have until like the rest of the year type of thing. The mashayikh who would have said that do it within the month of Shawwal, it seems that based upon this type of thing, that there might be a sense of somebody being accustomed to fasting because of the month of Ramadan. So because they are accustomed to fasting already, it makes sense for the mashayikh to say fast it in Shawwal because you already have a fasting habit now. So it's almost like hastening to the good. Excuse me, because if it was really just about the month of Shawwal itself, nobody would have disagreed about it. Everybody would have said, you have to do it within Shawwal. But that's not what's happening. There's a sense of no, you can do it like spread out throughout the rest of the year, and some of them saying within Shawwal. So anyway, something to perhaps explore a little bit further as well. Yes, Imran says that Maliki position is just starting from Shawwal. It's very interesting. So it will be unsurprising that there's a correspondence then on this particular point. Even though all he's transmitting here is that Malik doesn't like it, right? That's a separate thing for them they can resolve that. Um, قال في المحيط. Where is it? قال أبو يوسف يكره أن يوصل برمضان. So he says يكره أن يوصل برمضان صوم 6 من شوال. وهو قول مالك الأصح أنه لا بأس به. So so perhaps this is the تصحيح that he was talking about before as well. And that there's no harm in it. Then he mentions the same point here لأن الكراهة إنما كانت خوفا من أن يعد ذلك من رمضان فيكون تشبه بالنصارى واليوم زال ذلك المعنى فلا يكره نحوه في الذخيرة. As he said before, it's in the dhakira like this as well. I guess just as an aside, because I'm trying to see if he mentions anything over here, and perhaps he doesn't. But for example, I have a nas here from Shams al-A'imma. Although it's some type of khilaf on the nas from Halwani, he says أن الكراهة في المتصل بشهر رمضان. أما إذا أكل بعد العيد أياما. Right, so it's a bit of a tafsir. So what do? After Eid, you eat for a few days. Like you don't fast right now. So it's not muttasil bi yawm al-Eid because a lot of these are saying even if you fast immediately after Eid, you're good to go. Right? So here Shams al-Imam al-Halwani is saying no. Eat after Eid, right? And then he says after a few days, ثم صام لا يكره بل يستحب. Which again is making it about there being a clear separator now between the month of Ramadan, not just the day of Eid, because almost like that's organic kind of separator. So it's almost like that doesn't count for anything. And this idea would correspond to what those ulama, some of those other ulama said, which is again something which perhaps might not manifest over here. Actually, it's coming up in just a second. There is something here. I thought it might not come. So we'll see it in just a moment. Danielle says when the scholars speak about resemblance of Christians, there's something specific monasticism adds in. It seems about just the idea of Ahlul Kitab of ziyada on if leaving to the ziyada al al-mafrud, leading to the tark of the mafrud because you've made it difficult for yourself, right? It's almost like yeah, it's not exactly the same, but I guess the whole discussion of the source of Baqarah, right? The whole thing about the cow and then it being kind of over specified to the point where ma kadu yaf'alun. Right? It's almost like they weren't even going to do it. It was so close. So it's not exactly like that, but it's this idea of it's a Ahlul Kitab kind of way of kind of engaging in ibadah, and the Islamic way is to be fearful of those who went astray before us, and to kind of close this door immediately to say that no, there's no adding to the month of Ramadan. And that's why there's discussion of no, it's makruh, right? That's where this discussion begins. And that's why there's the whole thing about, okay, we'll separate it, do it throughout the year, do it like this, do it like that. Then it's almost like you disassociate it from the month of Ramadan, which is why they keep saying, oh, if the Yom al-Eid suffices as a mufarriq. Why do they keep saying that? Because they're trying to show you how it's really quite distinct to the month of Ramadan. And when it's done like that, then according to this, it will be acceptable. He says, وقال في الينابيع ولا يكره صوم الستة المتتابعة عقب الفطر. So 6 consecutively after يوم الفطر. وقيل يكره. It's also said it's makruh. والأول وصح. So you can see how the makruh position is there. It's not like it's absent. Right? So some people are saying it's makruh, which is important to kind of recognize in these ibarat, which is kind of shows you as well that he's being fair. He's not just now. Sometimes people sometimes they do like a cut paste. It's like you just take out the first, just mention the first bit, and don't necessarily mention like everything. Um, so الأول أصح. وذكر في عمدة المفتي أنه قيل الصحيح أنه إذا صام متتابعا ولم يجعل اليوم الثاني عيدا لا يكره، وإلا فهو مكروه وبه نأخذ. Hmm. So I guess he calls it the Umdatul Mufti here, but it's the I guess it was published recently as Umdatul Fatawa. But he calls it Umdatul Mufti. Maybe somebody could check that. Maybe in his oh really it has Umdatul Fatawa? Okay. Okay, that's good. That makes sense. Um so let's see. What does he say? الصحيح أنه إذا صام متتابعا ولم يجعل اليوم الثاني عيدا لا يكره. So he doesn't make uh وإلا فهو مكروه وبه نأخذ. Yeah, it seems like this he's just trying to say that if you skip out the day of Eid here, so it's just like the previous things. What about Christian? Let's see. Or non-Muslim du'as like "Dear God, help me feel inner peace," for example, are these acceptable to read at times? Sorry, Maria, I'm trying to figure out what the question is related to. Maybe you can just clarify that. Um, I guess tashabbuh. I guess if you're talking about tashabbuh, um, yeah, if it's just a dua, and that's yeah. Of course, the the faiths like they have an asl, right? So I mean, if there's some similarity in like a dua or whatever, I mean that's not far-fetched, right? So that's not going to be like prohibited. But what we're talking about is this idea of the ibadah being done in a certain way, which leads to some type of uh, leaving of it, right? So that's the issue. He says, وقال المرغيناني. Does he mention where? Unless he just means again from the Tajniz. He says المرغوبات صوم المحرم ورجب وشعبان وستة أيام من شوال متتابعة. You can see here again he says متتابعة. وقيل يستحب متفرقة في الأسبوع يومان. So this is also transmitted now. Some of the ulama, he says قيل over here, others Fatawa al-Zahiriyya, others Fatawa al-Hindiyya, for example, mentions it like this as well, that it's recommended to actually do it every 2 days a week. So it's almost like the first week you don't do anything, then because that's Eid, right? And it's almost like the week after you fast 2 days, 2 days after that, the week after that, 2 days a week after that. So it's almost like it's distinct enough from the month of Ramadan. Again, it's separated enough. Because remember, there's this whole discussion now as to whether you can do it consecutively or thereafter. He says, وقال صاحب المبتغى yeah. What does he say? He says يكره صوم ست من شوال عند أبي يوسف. Right? 6 days of Shawwal عند أبي يوسف مكروه. والأصح أنه لا بأس به. والأفضل تفريقها في الحول. Again, can you see تفريقها? What's superior now? To separate them throughout the year. So you fast 6 days in the year. It says وقيل في شوال يوزع عليه. في الحول وقيل في شوال يوزع عليه. So I guess in both cases you could say it was يوزع عليه. Now you do it sometime. Again, like we said before, you can have some type of asl for these types of things as well. You always have to think about the asl. It says وقال الإمام أبو بكر الإسماعيلي والفقيه محمد بن حامد التتابع فيه أفضل الأخبار. So you can see this is a very, very explicit thing now. Right? And of course, Ismaili, I'm not sure if this is even Hanafi. Is it Ismaili Hanafi? Muhammad ibn, I think we'd have to explore this, right? But if they are, then we'd say that this is a ikhtiyar of a specific person, right? Like the specific person said to do this. Like this is not the naqal, which is being transmitted down. Up until this point, we haven't really seen this. It's always been some said this, some said that, some said this, some said that. So unless this is explicitly coming now as the representative position of those who said to do it in Shawwal, which isn't far-fetched, right? Then it's why then it's tatabu' fihi afdal. Okay, let's see. He's speaking about tatabu'. Unless you can say that tatabu' means in Shawwal. So I guess we'd have to kind of figure that out. So there's a couple of questions with respect to that one. Yeah, he means spread it out in Shawwal. Yeah, in the previous one. Yeah, تفريقها في الحول وقيل في شوال يوزع عليه إياه. So spread it out, تفريق here in Shawwal. So I was just saying that يوزع is like for both really, isn't it? Because your whole you're doing it at different times of the year, so it's موزع throughout the year, and also here, but you could just say في شوال يوزع عليه as well. وقال في الذخيرة قال أبي يوسف كانوا يكرهون أن يتبعوا رمضان صياما خوفا من أن يلحق بالفريضة أراد به صوم الست. And I specifically about this issue. قال هذه اللفظة تدل على الكراهة في حق العوام لا في حق أهل العلم ثم نقل ما تقدم. Again, this is very, very interesting now. So he brings out what some other ulama said. This whole idea of it being makruh now is for the awam. It's not for the khawas. Because the khawas, they recognize that there's no ilhaq of the month of Ramadan. But of course, the Ammi, he can't really distinguish. Oh, now we have to do 6 more? I thought Ramadan was done, right? So it's like, so Ramadan's actually 36, really. Like it's not, it's like, so it's that type of thing. And there's a number of things like this in the fiqh, that not all of fiqh is for everybody, right? And there's a way to kind of transmit fiqh to people where some fiqh is for some people and some fiqh is for everybody, right? So not everything is for everyone. And there's many examples of this with respect to fasting, with respect to praying prayers out of precaution, for example, like after Salatul Jum'ah, praying like 4 rak'at, and in various cases where the ulama kind of point out that this is not for it's not for the awam, right? This is not to be brought up in front of the awam. You don't mention this to the ammi. The Ammi can't comprehend these types of things. Questions of Yawm al-Shak, for example, similarly manifest. Yasum al-Mufti sirran. Right, so he tells everybody, break your fast, but he carries on fasting, right, himself. So there's this idea of it's one standard for a certain set of people, and it's another standard for others. And this is important in the fiqh. There are matters which are there, even in major books like the Hidayah. هذا يعلم ولا يفتى به. Right. So this is the position. It's there. It's known. It's sound position. Everything. But you don't give fatwa according to this. Why? Because the awam they won't do this properly, right? So of course this is not it's not just to kind of gatekeep knowledge, but there is a sense of gatekeeping that it's important that that the ulama kind of transmit knowledge with hikmah. That's what it means. It's not just about trying to hide things from people. It's not about hiding. You're just not ahl for it. Even some of the Sahaba, like they didn't receive everything. Just go and listen to Sayyidina al-Hudayfa, for example, or others. Like the kind of statements that they made about the things that they were told by the Prophet ﷺ. Not everybody received everything, right? وقال في الوافي والكافي والمصفى يكره عند مالك وعندنا لا يكره. Again, it's a great blessing that alhamdulillah we have access to more and more books. So the Wafi, of course, has been published for a while. The Kafi was just published now. Hafidhuddin Nasafi's work, very Mubarak kind of text. And the Musaffa of Hafidhuddin Nasafi, again, these are all by Nasafi. Musaffa is also published. Again, he says يكره عند مالك وعندنا لا يكره. وقال في الغاية عامة المتأخرين لم يروا به بأسا. Right, so most of the later scholars, like for example Hadwani and all of these later scholars, right? So this is again this a bit more explicit now. that there's something about perhaps some of these earlier scholars taking issue with it, even though Hassan's there, Muhammad there, is there. There is something there whereby they don't seem to have an issue with it, but it's certainly later then everybody is kind of in agreement, as it were. That's what he's trying to express here. واختلفوا هل الأفضل التفريق أو التتابع. So you can see here again this idea of تفريق وتتابع, what's superior now. والزوزني السديدي كانت وفاته في رجب سنة 10 و700 710, وقال صاحب مجمع البحرين ولم يكره اتباع الفطري ب6 من شوال. Yeah, actually I mentioned earlier Ibn Sa'ati in his sharh as well. He actually has a couple of comments about this. He says وكانت وفاته سنة 94 و600 694, وقال خاتمة المتأخرين على العلامة أكمل الدين في شرح المشارق أي أكمل الدين البابرتي. شرح المشارق is not a work of fiqh, it's his sharh on the Masharik al-Anwar. Unfortunately it's not published. I think it might be published soon actually, because the muhaqqiq perhaps indicated that he was working on it or something. وقد اختلف العلماء في صفة هذا الصوم, فذهب مالك إلى أنه إذا كان متتابعا يكره, وذهب الأكثرون إلى عدم كراهته. So most of the ulama said it's not makruh, and عملا بظاهر الحديث, in a very loose kind of way. Of course, not a book of fiqh, but he's just saying kind of loosely that, okay, look, it said it right here that like the hadith is there, so based on this type of hadith it was acceptable. وإذا كان متفرقا في شوال فهو أبعد عن الكراهة والتشبه بالنصارى, which is what we said earlier as well, that Qadi Khan mentioned this idea of it being أبعد عن الكراهة, that it's more distant from the whole karaha discussion. وكانت وفاته في رمضان سنة 86 و700 786. And then he has another golden line, really. He says هذا ما حضرني الآن. He says this is what's come to me right now. Right? So this is what I mentioned before, right? That he's really just an encyclopedic scholar. So literally just writes down risala, just everything off the top of his head. Is it literally like that? I mean, it might be that these, you can't necessarily memorize all of the nusus for every single book like that. So I'm sure there was some sense of going back, but it's almost like perhaps we could interpret it as hadarani in the sense that, like, it was almost like immediate, that he knows it's there, and he's a nusus, and I've gathered them century after century, and here they are. Right. So again, and that's about knowing the masail and the madhan of these masail, that you're able to kind of go back to them in this manner. He says من منصوصات كتب علمائنا وبه تبين أن أحد ممن تقدم هذا القائل لم يقل أن الكراهة مطلقا أصح. So he said none of these people said that the karaha position was the asah position, like the qa'il Tabani said at the beginning. Then he said, I want to also address the other point about the fact that this has Ramadan has abrogated this, any other type of fasting. He says وأما الكلام الذي لا فائدة له في هذا المحل فقوله نسخ رمضان كل صوم إلى آخره. So he says, so there's no فائدة to this really. Why? He says وقوله وهذا وظيفة الجهال. He said there's also no فائدة to this either. ليس من كلام مالك وإنما هو أول كلام نفسه. So this is not actually the kalamun بنفسه, some sense of he's interpreted what Malik said, right? Interpreted what Malik said. So this is not what Malik said, but it was almost like, looked like this is what Malik said, right? In that original nas. وهو كلام مردود عليه شاهد عليه بما لا يخفى. He said this obviously, right? Obviously wrong, obviously mistaken. And then he says here, oops. He says إثبات استحباب صوم الست من شوال عند أهل العلم فقد قال في المغني. Now it's just making a general point. It's almost like he's departed now. He's done the madhab work now. Now it's just a general discussion. So because he's already proved now to us from the madhab how this is not recommended in the specific way that he's talked about now. So he says فقد قال في المغني والغاية أن هذا صوم مستحب عند كثير من أهل العلم. روي ذلك عن كعب بن أحبار وشعبي وميمون ابن مهران. So a number of the Salaf have mentioned it. وبه قال عبد الله بن مبارك والإمام الشافعي والإمام أحمد بن حنبل وإسحاق بن راهوي ومن عددناه من علمائنا. Right? So he says all of these great A'imma, mujtahidun, have affirmed the sunniyah of these fasts, and in addition to all of our ulama. فكعب كعب بن الأحبار تابعي كبير جليل، روى عن عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه وجماعة من الصحابة رضوان الله عليهم، وشعبي أدرك 500 صحابي وسمع من 48 منهم. So he had 48 of them directly شعبي. وميمون ابن مهران تابعي أصلا وهو قاضي عمر ابن عبد العزيز على الجزيرة, the area in that eastern or western Iraq, that province. ومن بعدهم من الأئمة المذكورين مشهور علمهم واجتهادهم. Yeah, so he carries on وقوله وكل حديث فيه فهو موضوع دعوة كاذبة. This is a false claim that every hadith on it is fabricated. He said فقد قال الإمام أحمد بن حنبل هو من 3 أوجه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. He has 3 parts to the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. يريد به أنه روي من حديث أبي أيوب, من حديث ثوبان, ومن حديث جابر. So now he's going to tell us the hadiths. He says فحديث أبي أيوب رواه مسلم في صحيحه والترمذي وقال حسن, وأبو داود وابن ماجه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من صام رمضان ثم أتبعه 6 من شوال كان كصيام الدهر. وقد أغنى تصحيح مسلم وتحسين الترمذي عن إبداء السند. If it's there in Tirmidhi, it's there in Muslim, you don't need a sanad. It's everything's good, right? These are من أئمة المحدثين. Then he says وحديث ثوبان رواه أبو داود والترمذي والنسائي عن الربيع بن سليمان عن يحيى بن حسان عن يحيى بن حمزة عن يحيى بن الحارث عن أبي أسماء الرحبي عن ثوبان وعن محمود بن خالد. So you could draw these out as it were like they do in تخريج, but he's just trying to show you the asanid for these now. عن محمد بن شعيب بن سابور عن يحيى بن الحارث عن أبي أسماء الرحبي عن ثوبان وابن ماجه عن هشام بن عمار عن صدقة من خالد عن يحيى بن الحارث عن أبي أسماء عن ثوبان والطبراني عن المقداد بن داود عن أسد بن موسى قال حدثنا الوليد بن مسلم قال حدثنا ثور بن يزيد عن يحيى بن الحارث عن أبي أسماء عن ثوبان عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من صام رمضان ثم أتبعه ب6 من شوال فإن ذلك صيام سنة. فإن ذلك صيام سنة. إذا ورواه سعيد بن منصور من صام رمضان شهر بعشرة أشهر, أي 10 for 10 months, because الحسنة بعشرة أمثالها. So each good deed is multiplied by 10. So he said 30 by 10 is 300. وصام 6 أيام بعد الفطر ذلك إتمام سنة. And 6 days after that, it says multiplying by 10, 60. So 360 is like you fasted the whole year. ويحيى ابن الحارث وأبو أسماء الرحبي شرط الصحيح. Not sure if something missing here, but yeah, that's the final statement. So, and then finally he says وحديث جابر رواه الإمام أحمد من طريق عمرو بن جابر الحضرمي عن جابر بن عبد الله رضي الله عنهما أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من صام رمضان و6 من شوال فكأنما صام سنة كلها. وعمر بن جابر تكلم فيه لكن المعنى ثابت بنص الكتاب. قال القاضي أبو بكر بن العربي في كتاب العارضة من صام رمضان و6 أيام بعد الفطر له صوم الدهر قطعا بالقرآن. So it's explicitly mentioned in the Quran. He says من جاء بالحسنة فله 10 أمثالها. شهر بعشرة ستة أيام و6 أيام بشهرين فهذا صوم الدهر. Okay, so this is how you get to صوم الدهر. Again, a lot of this is just quoting from the I guess in and out. I guess he quoted the Khaya and Ibn Qudama. He's going to come back to Ibn Qudama again later. So, like I mentioned, it's just a general kind of comments at this point. So now, two objections here that he wants to respond to. He says, وفي هذا سؤالان مشهوران. 2 questions. What's the first one? أحدهما عند الإمام الطحاوي في كتاب مشكل الآثار. قال وقد قال قائل إن مثل هذا لا ينبغي أن يقبل لما فيه من أن يصوم غير رمضان من أن صوم غير رمضان يعدل صوم رمضان ولا خلاف في أنه لا صوم أفضل من صوم رمضان. Yeah, he says this shouldn't be accepted really because it if you say like 30 times 10 is like 306 outside Ramadan is like times 10, it's as if like these fasts and Ramadan fasts are all the same. So this is not acceptable. Right? So he says فالجواب عن ذلك أن لصوم رمضان فضيلة كما ذكر من ذلك ما روي. So it has a فضيلة, it has a virtue, the fast of the month of Ramadan. من ذلك ما روي أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من صام رمضان إيمانا واحتسابا غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه. Right? That whoever fasts out of firm faith and out of seeking reward, then his previous sins will be forgiven. وروي من قام رمضان إيمانا. So that's if he fasts. Now if he stands, من قام رمضان إيمانا واحتسابا غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه. وروي أيضا من صام رمضان وقامه إيمانا واحتسابا غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه. فحقيقة الحديث على الصيام والقيام والله أعلم. Yeah, so he's saying, so the hadith really is about both. That if the person fasts and prays, then غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه. So this is the fadila of the month of Ramadan. ثم إذا كان صيام رمضان مفروضا وقيامه مسنونا الله عز وجل يجود على عباده من الثواب على أداء فرائضه بما شاء، فقد يكون الله عز وجل يكفر عن صيام رمضان مع ذلك ما يكون منه في بقية عشرة أشهر. وعلى صوم 6 أيام من شوال تكون الحسنة ب10 أمثالها كما قال الله تعالى في كتابه، فيكون ذلك مع ما جاد به عز وجل لمن يصوم شهر رمضان كفارة للسنة كلها وبالله التوفيق. So this was his response now. So how do you do it? It might be through the fadl of the month of Ramadan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him the thawab of the rest of the months here. He says, and then it's almost like it's just a case now of 6 for 10 for the ones of Shawwal for this small period. This is what he means by يجود على عباده من الثواب على أداء فرائضه بما شاء. فقد يكون الله عز وجل يكفر عن صيام رمضان مع ذلك ما يكون منه في بقية 10 أشهر. So it's almost like all of that is forgiven. So it's not the same. That's the khulasa, right? So it's like the barakah of Ramadan extends throughout this entire period. And then it's just the barakah of doing this deed which was equated, right? That's how it gets to the 10. But it's not the same as the month of Ramadan, whereby the barakat of it like extend throughout the year. That's how he distinguishes. So wabillahi tawfiq. And second one, the second issue as well. It's like, wait a second, we're prohibited from fasting the whole year, right? You're not supposed to fast all year. So why is this a good thing now? So والثاني أورده في المغني ونقله في الغاية وهو فإن قيل لا دليل في الحديث على فضيلتها لأن النبي عليه صلى الله عليه وسلم شبه صيامها بصيام الدهر وهو مكروه. So there's no hadith there's no indication or proof in the hadith which indicates its virtue because the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام said it's كصيام الدهر. Right? That whoever, remember, what does the hadith say? Remember, this is a perspective now. Whoever fasts 6 days, right, or fasts the month of Ramadan and follows it up with 6 days, it's like they fasted the whole year. Okay, so what part of this is a fadila? Like what part of this hadith indicates to you that it's virtuous to fast these days? This is the ishkal. Yeah. So he's saying no, because we already know that you're not supposed to fast the year. So it might have been a statement to say it's like fasting the year, so don't do it. Right? So don't do it. It's another wajh. Right? It's another wajh for it now. So he says, وَالْجَوَابُ إِنَّمَا كُرِهَ صَوْمُ الدَّهْرِ لِمَا فِيهِ مِنَ الضَّعْفِ. He said, no. That's not how it works. But he's saying, of course, this is from Ibn Qudama now. But it's just a generic point. So he says, no, the reason why we were prohibited from that, because it's going to weaken us. وَالتَّشَبُّهُ بِالتَّبَتُّلِ. And it resembles like almost like the celibacy, as it were, this kind of life of rahbaniyah, being monasticism, as it were. That's not praiseworthy. He says, ولولا ذلك لكان فضلا عظيما لاستغراقه الزمان بالعبادة والطاعة. And he said, if it weren't for that, those matters, then it would have been a tremendous thing to do to fast all the time, right? It's greatly virtuous. والمراد بالخبر التشبه به في حصول العبادة على وجه عري عن المشقة. Yeah, so the point is that you attain unto this tremendous benefit by engaging in ibadah which doesn't tire you out. Right? So you do something which isn't harmful to you. كما قال عليه السلام من صام 3 أيام من كل شهر كان كمن صام الدهر. Right? 3 days from every month, like you fasted the whole year. Because again, 3 times 10 is 30. You have 12 months, 360. ذكر ذلك حثا على صيامها وبيان فضلها ولا خلاف في استحبابها. Again, nobody disagrees that 3 days from every month is recommended. So he's saying that the same wording was used, indicating that that's not what it means. ونهى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عبد الله بن عمر عن قراءة القرآن في أقل من 3. That's why normally it's makruh to recite the entirety of the Quran less than 3 days. Why? Because the point is not the qira'ah, the recitation of the Quran, but it's the engagement with the ma'ani of the Quran. And you can't do that if you recite too fast, if you recite it too quickly, if you make it about qira'ah. It's not about qira'ah, it's about fahm, it's about ma'ani, it's about tatbiq, it's about amal. And that doesn't manifest in a short period of time. So he says, وقال صلى الله عليه وسلم, but despite that, he said, من قرأ قل هو الله أحد فكأنما قرأ ثلث القرآن. So أراد التشبيه بثلث القرآن في الفضل لا في كراهة الزيادة عليه. So the same thing, that you recite it, then it's as if you recited a third of the Quran. So you recite it, it's like my kids do sometimes, and then they're like, oh, just recited the Quran like 4 times today. And it's like, yeah, how so? Because, recited Qul Huwallahu Ahad like 12 times or whatever. And it's like, mashallah, I did like 4. So it's, yeah, so he's saying that this, again, is like this specific problem. And then again, he's coming back to Ibn Qudama for another point, which is about the idea of the تفريق. So he says قال صاحب المغني إذا ثبت هذا فلا فرق بين كونها متتابعة أو متفرقة في أول الشهر أو في آخره لأن الحديث ورد مطلقا من غير تقييد. Beginning of the month, end of the month, consecutively, separately, all good. Why? Because the hadith is مطلق. ولأن فضلها لكونها تصير مع الشهر 36 يوما والحسنة بعشر أمثالها فيكون ذلك ك360 يوما. Just as we said, it becomes 36 multiplied by 10 becomes 360 وهي سنة كلها, and that's the entirety of the year. فإذا وجد ذلك في كل سنة صار كصيام الدهر. If you do that every year, it's like you fasted the whole year. وهذا المعنى يحصل مع التفريق. And he says, and this معنى happens through تفريق as well, الله أعلم. i.e. that you don't have to consecutively after the month, but rather if you do 6 days thereafter, according to what he's saying here, I guess it's within the month. But not in accordance with what we said before. Also, what we know, even in the mutun of the madhab, like the multaqa, for example, the tanweer, it's explicitly, the mutun are explicitly saying that it's recommended to do tafriq. Right? So so there's still a sense of, even though there's no necessarily karaha there, but there is a khilaf, some type of loose karaha. And that's why the mutun are actually mentioning it quite explicitly, that the tafriq is considered to be superior. So there is something there. Remember that last paragraph is from Ibn Qudama, so it doesn't necessarily take into consideration the other madhabi discussions that we covered previously. And then finally he says, وَلَمَّا تَمَّ هَذَا سَمَّيْتُهُ تَحْرِيرَ الْأَقْوال. Yeah, resolving, as it were, like the positions with respect to fasting 6 days of Shawwal. والله سبحانه وتعالى أسأل أن ينفع به وييسر لنا العمل بما علم. إنه سبحانه وتعالى أكرم مسؤول. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا وحسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل والحمد لله وحده. So alhamdulillah الذي بنعمته تتم الصالحات. Alhamdulillah, this is the end of the risala. So as before, of course, these are short, brief readings, brief points touching upon important masail at different places, but it's there's always other things you could add to these types of discussions. But hopefully it gives us a sense of the whole discussion on this issue. Of course, there's always more that you can explore. Right, so there's always more that can be done, But it's a nice khulasa. The mutuna mentioned mutaakhirin don't like, so you don't have they don't have an ishkal with it. So the khulasa is that you could it's fine for people to be told to fast it. It's fine for people to fast it, and it's fine for it to happen consecutively after the day of Eid, even though if doing otherwise, like separating it throughout the month or doing 2 a week, for example, as some of the ulama recommended, even just pragmatically, it makes sense to kind of give people such a recommendation. People are busy after Eid, the second day of Eid, and third day of Eid, and the fourth day of Eid. So the first week is kind of gone in Eid, and so it makes sense after that, to try to tell people to kind of, it's like we're going to go out for like a nice milkshake now, and you're like, I'm fasting. Right? It's like Ramadan's over, akhi. Like, why are you fasting now? Right? So it's that type of it. So you kind of get through that phase, when everyone's calmed down a little bit. So even just practically, it makes sense to kind of do it later. And that's the it's there, it's transmitted, and it was deemed to be acceptable. So there's no need to kind of express that. Because that they gave all the ta'lilat for why it was makruh in that early period, right? So anyway, there's like I said, there could be further tahrir going into this issue, further exploration of what other ulama are saying as well. Maybe we could come out with a more detailed conclusion with respect to the issue. But alhamdulillah, this gives us some sense of it, inshallah. Just a note, the copy in Majmu'at Rasa'il was terrible, missing lines, taqdim, ta'khir, tahrif. Oh, right, I didn't actually realize, sorry, I did comment on the Majmu'at Rasa'il. I didn't actually check if it was in there. So jazakallah khair, thanks for letting us know about that. Yeah, it's unfortunate that sometimes these books are published, but it's just not done very well. Could one not argue that the negation of karaha is different from the ithbat of istihbab? Negation of karaha is different from the ithbat of istihbab. I mean, if you do ithbat of the istihbab, then it's almost like what's the counter implication is that is that there's some level of karaha. But of course, if you say makruh, then we're not talking about, it's a khilaf al-awla type of thing. That it doesn't need like a specific kind of referencing of it as such, even though it's there, and that the ulama have mentioned it, as we've seen throughout this risala. But if we're just talking about what the mutun are expressing now, then it's almost like they're expressing the culmination of all of this effort, right? Because remember, both the Tanweer and the Multaqa are coming after Ibn Qutlubugha, not before. They're both after. So the later primers have settled on something now. They basically settled on what the mutaakhirin have settled on, with a bit of tafsir, which is the idea of there being tafriq and not just unconditionally. Mura'atan li khilaf Abu Yusuf, because Abu Yusuf had this idea of not necessarily being right there. Anyway, inshallah, let's call it a day there. Barakallahu ta'ala fikum. Thanks to everybody for coming. And please keep me in du'as, inshallah, and I hope to see everybody soon again. Jazakumullah khairan. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala benefit us through this reading and increase us in knowledge and practice and sincerity and tawfiq and in our understanding of the madhab. And may He grant a tremendous relief to all of the ummah that is continuing to suffer, and grant us a tremendous assistance and forgiveness, and allow us to transform ourselves and enter into sunnah ظاهرا وباطنا. صلى الله وسلم بارك على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.